Hi class, my name is Tiffany and I chose to do my critical thinking project on children who are exposed to domestic violence. In the United States alone, over 20 people fall victim to domestic violence every minute. Domestic violence hotlines receive over 20,000 calls in one day, and this accounts for nearly 20% of all violent crime. So, that said, a lot of domestic violence occurs behind closed doors, so one can assume that these statistics are actually much bigger than what we see on websites or reports. And from a social work perspective, we often think about those who are direct victims of the violence, and that's really important to consider those individuals. But and we still do not do enough for those victims as a society to really protect them, especially in the long term, and the mental health spectrum. So, but also we often forget about the children who witness this and what that does to them from a psychological and a physical and a social viewpoint throughout their lives. So that's why I felt that it was important to kind of focus on this for this particular project. Um, Children often respond to domestic violence in a fright or flight or fright or freeze reaction, and a lot of that just depends on the child's past experience of trauma, the children's age, the children's social support, within inside and outside of the household, and all kinds of other factors. So, generally, younger children tend to respond more in a fright, like crying or screaming, while older children may be more seemingly non-reactive to the situation. However, that's kind of just depends on a lot of circumstances. So, witnessing domestic violence, especially among loved ones, is significant in a child, and it presents as a traumatic experience because when children are growing up, this family unit is the comfort, it's the norm, it's what they can bounce all of the new information they're receiving from their social worlds off of. So that really kind of throws a whole, shake up in their lives to follow. Short-term issues such as anxiety, aggression, separation anxiety, behavioral problems, self-blames, academic problems, and developmental aggression often occur in children who witness this, especially in multiple if they see it happen multiple times. And these specific symptoms can manifest in the long term in much the same way or in different ways, because anxiety, it can turn into a chronic issue, like just like depression or aggression. And a lot of times, when we talk about trauma in children, we talk about adverse childhood experiences, and just ACEs in general are correlated with the presence of depression, anxiety, often that occur within the lifespan. ACEs are also associated with a higher prevalence of substance abuse disorders, self-destructive, and suicidal behaviors later in life. These unhealthy coping mechanisms develop as a result of children's impaired cognitive function or inability to cope with the disruptive emotions that they're feeling. And another mental health implication is PTSD. Even for children who are younger than 6 years old, even just knowing that this occurred, and knowing that there was domestic violence within caregivers, is enough to provoke episodes of PTSD. And as most of us know, PTSD has a whole spectrum of mental health implications on its own, and it can affect cognitive function, attention, memory, sleep, and personality. So the mental health problems that can result from being exposed to domestic violence are endless. And but they're also, and they can transfer, or they kind of react with each other into physical health problems, social health problems, and when we have a lot of social health problems, then that can affect economic circumstances. So if someone is unable to, be involved in social networks and have that support, if they are, not willing, they're kind of withdrawn to, go seek resources, then, it can affect their whole economic circumstance, which then again, it could affect their physical health. In terms of physical health, we talk about children being at this prime development, when the neurons are quickly developing in their brain, and they're developing the ability in the prefrontal cortex to execute cognitions and make decisions, and when that is disrupted, then that affects the everything in life. So and other chronic health problems such as heart disease, and specifically diabetes, has been linked to exposure to domestic violence. So that's just kind of a quick glimpse. There's tons of information out there if you want to further investigate that, and it's actually quite interesting. So when we talk about treatment, prevention, intervention, then we want to look at evidence-based approaches to kind of get us started, because this comes from strategic research that can give counselors or other people who are intervening or advocating on behalf of these children kind of a place to get started. And there's tons of evidence-based practices that are specific to children. One of those that I kind of enjoyed reading about, other than I think coping skills training is a great preventative effort for children, because it can be implemented anywhere and it can be done as a preventative measure. So that's something to consider. But the one I want to talk about today is called the Taking Action Program. And this is also referred to as a self-control program. And it can be used in the home, in the community, in the school. It can be used and has been used in a variety of settings. And it is primarily used to treat depression and anxiety in children. And both of these are common issues that children who witness domestic violence see. So the purpose of this is to utilize self-observation charting to help children recognize behavior in response to environmental triggers. And then it helps them, find strategically find ways to respond to those triggers. And it also teaches social skills training, relaxation, imagery, and cognitive restructuring. So I think this is really, really important, because self-control really taps into what I was talking about earlier in this executive function, the ability to, just really see yourself being able to kind of control your I guess, fate to a certain extent. So the trauma was not the children's fault, and I think that's important to let children know. But by taking the initiative and using knowledge that is giving to them as tools, they can essentially better themselves. And I think that the adjustments that I would make to this program are particularly is to include a thorough component on self-esteem, because self-esteem is a part of self-control, and without that esteem, we don't have the motivation to really feel that we are in charge of helping better our lives to a certain extent. So I would incorporate many maybe games or activities that promote self-esteem, and set that example as a counselor, that I have positive view of myself, and even talk in encouraging positive tones. I would also maybe I would talk about coping as well, pretty thoroughly, and kind of let children explore different, the Taking Action program talks about relaxation and imagery and things like that. But I think part of self-control is allowing them to explore those and see what best works for them. And I would also include, social support systems and let them kind of recognize other support systems outside of their caregivers or whomever that the domestic violence involves, and really emphasize like friendship and teamwork and mentorship. Finally, I might include family family therapy, and I think this is just a minute, baby. Okay, I will take care. Thank you. I'm sorry about that, but I would let them. And this depends on this particular situation. It would be really nice to help, bring the family in and kind of talk strategically, if that's appropriate, about, just that unit. But that's not always going to be the best option, and that just depends on the situation. So I've given you a lot, and I'm sorry it's scattered. This is probably the 8th time I've shot this video, and my children are kind of everywhere. So I'm going to close here, and if you have any questions or would like any more information, just send me an email, and I would be glad to give that to you.